The auditorium was filled with soft laughter, restless feet, and the innocent chatter of children waiting to perform. Proud parents leaned forward in their seats, phones ready to capture the moment. Among them sat Cecilia Mirantis, poised and graceful, her beauty the kind that drew eyes even in a crowd. Yet beneath the perfect smile, a faint shadow of fatigue lingered. Only one person noticed it, her daughter. Clara, 12 years old, clutched her violin tighter than she should have. She had watched her mother's hands shake that morning. She had seen the way her mother's breath caught when she climbed the stairs. Clara's heart thumped harder than the orchestra's drums as she stepped onto the stage. For her, this performance wasn't just about music. It was about making her mother proud, about giving her something to smile at in a life where smiles had grown rare. Halfway through Clara's solo, it happened. A sharp sound tore through the hall, not from a violin, but from Cecilia's chair. Her body jerked once, then slumped. Her head bowed forward. The scarf she wore slipped to the ground like a fallen flag. The hall froze. Gasps rippled. Clara's bow screeched across the strings as she dropped her instrument. "Mama!" Her cry shattered the silence more than any note could. Cecilia didn't answer. Her chest rose faintly, then fell again, too slow, too shallow. Teachers rushed forward. A woman screamed. But Adrian Mirantis, the husband, the man who was supposed to move first, remained seated. He adjusted his cufflinks before standing, his face etched with irritation rather than fear. "It's nothing. She's tired. Always pushing herself." Tired? Clara's eyes burned. She could see her mother's lips had lost their color, could feel the chill in her hand as she clutched it desperately. "No," she shouted. "Something's wrong with Mama." That voice, that desperate cry of a child, cut deeper than any medical alarm. Don't miss stories like this, where love, betrayal, and shocking truths collide. Hit subscribe right now and stay with us until the very end. Paramedics stormed in. The hall became chaos. Cecilia's fragile body was lifted onto a stretcher, her scarf left behind on the polished floor. Clara scrambled after her, refusing to let go of her hand. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered over and over, "Stay with me, Mama. Please stay with me." From the corner of her eye, Clara saw her father pull out his phone, his voice low as he muttered to a colleague about stress, business, responsibilities, everything but his wife's collapsing life. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat by her mother's bedside, small fingers intertwined with Cecilia's motionless ones. The machines hummed, the house stood too still, and fear hung heavier than silence itself. When the door opened, it wasn't her father who entered. It was a stranger, or so he seemed. Dr. Elias Moreau. He didn't walk in with the cold detachment of a physician. He knelt beside Clara first, eye level, and spoke in a tone soft enough to soothe her pounding heart. "Tell me what you saw, little one. Tell me everything about your mother." No adult had asked her that before. Not her father, not the house staff, only this man. So, she told him, about the shaking hands, about the sudden fatigue, about the way Cecilia always smiled, even when she was clearly hurting. When Elias touched Cecilia's wrist, his eyes softened. For a fleeting moment, when her lashes fluttered open, their gazes locked, she saw more than a doctor looking at her. She saw someone who cared, someone who noticed. Her lips trembled. No words came, but her eyes said everything. "Don't let me go." To the world, it was just a fainting spell. To Adrian, it was nothing more than tired nerves. But to Clara and to the stranger who had just walked into their lives, this was the beginning of a truth that would expose betrayal, ignite forbidden love, and leave a powerful man speechless. Elias stood at the bedside longer than most physicians would have. He wasn't simply checking vitals, he was reading her, as though each shallow breath carried a message no machine could translate. His eyes moved from Cecilia to Clara, then to the still space where a husband should have been standing closer, should have been worried. Tall, but not imposing, Elias carried a quiet strength. His presence was a blend of calm authority and unspoken warmth. His hands, steady and precise, rested on Cecilia's wrist with practiced care, yet there was tenderness there, a gentleness that Clara noticed right away. This was not a man who rushed cases. He asked questions no one else bothered with. How long had she felt weak? Did she ever mention dizziness? Had Clara noticed her mother coughing at night? It was in the way he lowered his voice for Clara, kneeling to her level, that revealed who Elias truly was. He had no child of his own, no wife waiting at home, but something in his heart was ready to protect, ready to carry the burdens of those who had been left unheard. He was observant, not just of symptoms, but of silences, glances, and the kind of truths people don't dare say aloud. To Clara, he was the first adult who actually believed her. To Cecilia, in that fragile moment, he was not merely a doctor, he was hope. Cecilia lay against the cushions, her breathing uneven, but even in weakness, there was grace in her. She had been raised to hold her head high, to smile no matter what weight rested beneath her ribs. At gatherings, people often said she carried herself like a queen, composed, elegant, adored. But behind closed doors, she bore her struggles quietly, unwilling to let anyone, especially her daughter, see her crumble. Her beauty was not loud, it was the kind that lingered in memory. Almond-shaped eyes framed by dark lashes, lips curved into a smile even when her body begged for rest. Yet what made her striking was not her appearance, it was the quiet strength she showed when everything around her was fragile. Cecilia had learned to live in shadows. Her husband's absence had forced her to craft her own light. She laughed for Clara's sake, even when laughter cost her breath. She walked through grand rooms filled with riches, yet felt more alone than she had ever imagined. And though she did not say it aloud, her deepest fear was leaving her daughter. Unprotected in a world where wealth could buy many things, but not devotion, the way she looked at Elias that night was telling. It wasn't only gratitude, it was the rare comfort of being truly seen. For once, someone noticed a tremor in her fingers, the strain in her eyes. For once, she wasn't pretending to be fine. Adrian entered the room late, as though timing was always his to control. His suit was flawless, every button fastened, his tie perfectly knotted. He carried the scent of wealth, the kind that comes from polished offices, private cars, and boardrooms where his word was law. Yet in that bedroom, with his wife pale against the pillows, his authority carried no weight. He stood by the window, phone in hand, eyes skimming over financial updates while his daughter clung to her mother's side. He spoke of exhaustion as though her collapse were an inconvenience, a delay in his schedule. Adrian was a man who measured his worth by empire and status. He could negotiate contracts worth millions but failed to notice the way Cecilia's laughter had faded over the years. He was a husband by name, a father by obligation, but his presence was a shadow that flickered in and out of their lives. Some men cheat with shame, Adrian cheated with arrogance. His distractions weren't hidden, they were simply ignored, as though money excused absence, as though power could replace affection. To his peers, he was enviable. To his wife and child, he was unreachable. Where Cecilia's grace was born of quiet strength, Isolde's beauty was sharp, calculated, deliberate. Every tilt of her chin, every step of her heel was chosen to command attention. To the public, she was a glamorous figure at Adrian's side. To Cecilia, she was a shadow creeping into her home. Isolde spoke sweetly when others listened, but her whispers were laced with venom. She knew Adrian's hunger for admiration, and she fed it carefully, reminding him of his power, belittling Cecilia with words disguised as concern. "She's delicate. She's not strong enough for you," she'd purr, pressing her presence into the spaces Cecilia had been forced to vacate. To Adrian, she was excitement, a distraction dressed as affection. But to Clara, whose young eyes saw more than adults realized, Isolde was a threat. She sensed it in the way her father softened around her, in the way her mother stiffened when her name was mentioned. Isolde was beauty with no soul behind it. She was elegance without loyalty, desire without love. Clara was the smallest figure in the room, yet the one carrying the heaviest truth. With wide eyes that mirrored her mother's, she had the kind of sensitivity children are often underestimated for. She noticed everything, the hollow way her father spoke, the faint tremors in her mother's hands, the way Elias's eyes lingered with genuine care. At 12, Clara was already wise enough to know that money didn't guarantee. Safety and love wasn't always where it was supposed to be. She clung to her violin because it gave her voice shape, because her music could express what her heart couldn't. That night, she saw more than anyone else. She saw her father's distance. She saw her mother's quiet suffering. She saw the gentleness in Elias, and for the first time she felt something unfamiliar, trust in an adult outside her blood. To her, Elias wasn't just a doctor. He was the one person who listened, and to Cecilia, that mattered more than anything. In that house, beneath chandeliers and marble floors, 5 lives had collided. Each carried a role, the absent husband, the fragile wife, the rival lover, the child, who saw too much, and the doctor whose compassion stirred everything into motion. What began with a collapse was already shifting into something larger, something that would test loyalty, ignite forbidden love, and reveal a truth that would tear masks apart. The quiet hum of medical instruments filled Cecilia's bedroom. Elias set his case on the table, carefully arranging stethoscope, vials, and small instruments with the precision of habit. But when he turned to Cecilia, the tools became secondary. He studied her as though every line of fatigue written across her face mattered more than the data he would collect. "Let's start simple," he said softly. His voice carried reassurance, the kind that invited trust rather than demanded it. He guided her wrist gently, checking her pulse, then lifted the stethoscope to her chest. Cecilia's breathing was shallow, uneven, and with each exhale her gaze flicked toward her daughter, as if worried more about Clara's fear than her own weakness. Clara sat at the foot of the bed, hands clenched together. She didn't look away once. When Elias lowered the stethoscope, she leaned forward. "Is Mama going to be okay?" Elias hesitated just long enough to choose his words carefully. He didn't want to promise more than he could give. "I'm going to do everything I can," he answered. His tone carried a weight that Clara, even at her young age, believed. She edged closer to him, as though proximity to this doctor meant safety. Her small fingers brushed against his sleeve, and for the first time, since the recital, she allowed herself to breathe without sobbing. Adrian entered then, a glass of scotch in hand, his steps deliberate, his sigh heavy. He glanced once at his wife, then at the doctor kneeling beside her. "Is all this necessary?" he asked, as though the fainting spell were nothing more than a detail in his day. "She's prone to fatigue, always has been. Too many social events, too much worrying about trivial things." Elias straightened, his expression calm but firm. "With respect, sir, fainting isn't trivial. Her blood pressure is low. Her heart rhythm needs further monitoring." Adrian waved him off, his lips tightening. "Doctors always find problems when they look hard enough. She'll be fine after rest. I'll have the staff bring her light meals and tea." Cecilia's eyes fell to her lap. She said nothing, though her silence screamed louder than protest. Clara, however, could not stay quiet. "Papa." She couldn't breathe, she blurted, her voice trembling. She almost fell from her chair. "She's not fine." Her father turned toward her, brows furrowing. "Clara, enough." The girl flinched but did not back down. She turned instead to Elias, seeking comfort. Her eyes begged him to insist, to stand where her father would not. Elias crouched again, meeting Clara's gaze. "You did the right thing by speaking up," he said. "Your mother needs you to keep noticing. Don't ever stop telling the truth, no matter who doubts it." Clara nodded, relief softening her features. For the first time, she felt someone was standing beside her, not against her. Elias returned his focus to Cecilia. "I'll need to run more detailed tests. Fatigue doesn't just appear, it comes from somewhere. We have to find the source before it worsens." Cecilia's lips curved faintly, not quite a smile, but gratitude flickered in her eyes. In a world where her husband dismissed her, where her worries were smoothed over like wrinkles in expensive fabric, someone was finally listening. Adrian shifted uncomfortably by the window. He tapped the rim of his glass, his gaze fixed outside rather than on his wife's pale face. "Do whatever you think is best," he muttered, "but keep it discreet. I won't have rumors about her health stirring unnecessary concern." Discreet. As if her collapse had been an embarrassment rather than a warning. Elias held back the sharp retort rising in his chest. Instead, he nodded once, professional. But inside, he wondered how a man could stand so far from the pain of his own family. Cecilia closed her eyes, weary. Clara curled onto the bed beside her mother, her small hand resting on her mother's arm protectively. Elias watched the scene in silence, the image burning itself into him. A fragile woman fighting to stay strong. A child forced to carry the weight her father refused to bear. It was in that moment that the fracture in this wealthy family revealed itself, not through gold, not through grandeur, but through neglect. Money lined their walls, but no richness filled their bonds. As Elias packed away his tools, he looked once more at Cecilia. "We'll find answers," he promised quietly, almost to himself. She gave the smallest nod, her eyes shimmering with both trust and unspoken fear. Clara leaned into her mother, whispering, "I believe him, Mama. He won't let anything happen to you." Adrian turned away, phone pressed to his ear already, muttering about meetings and deadlines. His voice faded down the hall, leaving behind silence that spoke volumes. The house was grand, the wealth undeniable. Yet in that moment, Elias saw it clearly. Behind all the marble and chandeliers, this family was fractured, and no amount of money could hold together what love had already abandoned. Morning light found its way through the curtains, soft and steady, as if careful not to disturb the woman resting beneath them. Cecilia's lashes fluttered when Elias entered. He greeted her with a nod that felt like a promise. "Good morning," he said, setting his case on the side table. "Let's see how your heart and lungs are today." His movements were unhurried. He warmed the diaphragm of the stethoscope with his palm before touching it to her skin. Cecilia noticed. No one had taken such care in a very long time. The air carried the faintest touch of lavender from her scarf, folded neatly on the chair. He listened longer than most would, eyes focused, brows knit in quiet thought. To him, she was not an appointment, she was a person. Clara hovered nearby, shoulders tense. Elias tipped his head toward her. "Would you help me, partner?" he asked. Clara stepped forward like a soldier called to duty. He showed her how to count the beats at her mother's wrist, how to watch the rise and fall of a breath the way one watches a tide. 1, 2, 3, she whispered, steadying herself with the rhythm. "Good," Elias murmured. "You see more than many adults do." Cecilia's lips curved. "She always has." Elias checked reflexes, skin tone, capillary refill, pupils. He asked questions that went beyond checklists. "When do you feel most tired? After meals? Before bed? Do you ever feel lightheaded when you stand? Any headaches, nausea, strange tastes?" Cecilia answered honestly, but every so often she glanced at Clara, apologetic for her own weakness. Elias noticed the apology and pressed a little pillow beneath her elbow, as if to say that comfort was not a luxury, but a right. He turned to the small tray by the window where several bottles stood in a neat row. His gaze lingered, then moved on. "We'll create a journal," he said, returning to the bedside. "Simple. Times you eat, what you feel before and after, how you sleep. I'll come daily for now. We'll follow the clues." Clara straightened. "I can keep it, doctor." "I was hoping you'd say that," he replied, and handed her a thin notebook from his case. He wrote her name on the inside cover in careful script. Clara Morentis, guardian of details. Cecilia watched the exchange with wet eyes. "You're giving her something to hold on to," she said softly. "She already holds the most important thing," he answered, glancing at their joined hands. "She holds you." Later, when Clara stepped into the hallway to fetch water, the room quieted. Elias pulled a chair closer. "Tell me the truth as you feel it," he said. "Not the brave version, the real one." Cecilia met his gaze. "I'm frightened," she said. "Not of pain, of absence. I'm terrified of my daughter waking up to a house that looks like ours and finding it empty of me." He did not interrupt. He let her words settle, then offered a hand, open, steady, not demanding. She placed her fingers in his lightly. He counted a slow 4 with her breath, guiding her into calmer rhythm. "Your body is asking for help," he said. "We're going to listen to it until it tells us everything." A smile flickered and vanished. "You make it sound as if my body is a person I can speak to." "It is," he said, "and it's been speaking for months. You've been too kind to everyone else to hear it." She swallowed. "Kindness is easier than conflict, not when it costs you yourself," he answered gently. Her eyes drifted to the door. "He says I worry too much, that I make a fuss." Elias did not comment on the husband. He looked at her, only her. "You kept your daughter safe enough to see what others would not. That's not fuss, that's love." Cecilia turned her face to the ceiling. A tear slid toward her hairline. Elias did not pretend not to see it. He offered a cloth, and something in that simple gesture, no embarrassment, no rush, opened a space in her that had been shut for years. She breathed easier. Clara returned, balancing 2 glasses in small, careful hands. "I brought water and apple slices. She likes them thin." "Perfect," Elias said. "You're the team captain." Clara's cheeks flushed with purpose. She set the tray down, then stood on tiptoe to kiss her mother's temple. "You promised to hear my piece at the winter concert," she whispered. "So you're not allowed to leave." Cecilia stroked her daughter's hair. "I intend to be in the front row. We'll make sure of it," Elias added. "I have an idea. Walks, short, timed, will build strength without pushing too hard. 10 minutes today, 12 tomorrow. Only if you feel steady." "In the garden?" Clara asked. "If your mother wishes," he said. Cecilia nodded. "It would be good to see the maple leaves again." "Coat and scarf," Elias said, turning practical. And a hat that makes you feel beautiful. Cecilia laughed, soft, genuine, and the sound startled even her. The room changed with it. The air felt kinder. The first walk took place later that afternoon. Elias offered his arm. Cecilia took it without hesitation. Clara kept pace on the other side, a little procession of 3 moving through a corridor, lined with family portraits that told a story none of them wanted to read just then. They stepped into the courtyard. The crisp air kissed Cecilia's cheeks and raised color where pallor had reigned. 1 minute, Elias said, checking his watch. We turn back if there's any dizziness. She nodded. They made it to the fountain and rested. Clara sat on the rim and recounted the recital from memory, every measure, every note she had planned to play for her mother. She hummed a few bars, her voice thin with shyness, then stronger when Cecilia's eyes lit up. You sound like sunlight, Cecilia told her. Elias watched the exchange, the warmth building in his chest. He did not intrude. Some moments are medicine themselves. On the return, Cecilia's steps slowed. Elias steadied her without making a ceremony of it. You did well, he said, when they reached the doorway. The body remembers. We'll teach it to trust again. Clara squeezed his hand. Thank you for bringing her outside. He squeezed back. Thank you for reminding her what she loves. In the evening, when the house grew quiet and the staff retreated, Elias sat at the desk beside the bed and explained the plan again. We'll do basic blood work today, additional panels tomorrow. I want to adjust one medication temporarily. I'll leave detailed instructions. If anything feels different, stronger heartbeat, dizziness, nausea, call me immediately. No waiting. Not even 5 minutes. Cecilia studied him. You speak like someone who's lost a patient and refuses to repeat the lesson. I speak like someone who believes you are needed, he said. By your daughter, first and always. But also by yourself. Her eyes shone. I haven't felt needed in years. You are. To her. To yourself. To more than you know. Clara had curled up at the foot of the bed with a journal. She raised her head. What if I write feelings too, not just numbers, like... Mama smiled today when the light touched the curtains. Does that help? It helps more than you realize, Elias said. You'll show us what matters while I measure what changes. Cecilia brushed Clara's hair back. You always find language I cannot, little one. Clara beamed, then wrote, Mama smiled at the curtains. She underlined it twice. A knock sounded at the doorway. Adrian leaned in, tie loosened, eyes on his phone. How long will this take, doctor? I've got calls. Elias rose, composed. We're finished for tonight. I've left instructions. Please ensure she rests and eats light. Adrian nodded without looking up. Good, good. His gaze flicked to his wife. Don't stress yourself, Cecilia. I'll try, she answered, though the words felt like a pledge she'd made too many times alone. The door closed. Silence stretched. Clara stared at the wood paneling, as if it might answer for him. Elias returned to his chair and spoke to her quietly. Your job is not to carry what belongs to him, he said. Your job is to love your mother. You're already doing that better than anyone. Clara's throat worked. Is it bad that I wish he would care more? It's human, Elias said. It's also not something you can fix. Cecilia reached for her daughter's hand again. We have each other. Elias looked at their fingers intertwined and felt a resolve settle in him like bedrock. Before leaving, he placed a small folded card on the nightstand. My direct number, he said. Day or night. Cecilia's eyes widened. I don't want to be a burden. You won't be, he replied. You'll be a call I'm grateful to receive. She inhaled, unsteady, then exhaled with a quiet thank you. He stepped closer, careful with the distance, and adjusted the edge of her blanket. The gesture was delicate, almost reverent. Their eyes met, and the silence between them filled with warmth that neither dared name. Rest, he said. Stay for tea tomorrow? She asked, surprising herself with the boldness. If you'll have me, he answered. Clara chimed in from the foot of the bed. I'll make it. Mama likes a touch of honey. Then I'm honored, Elias said. He turned to go. Cecilia's voice followed him, barely above a breath. I'm not afraid when you're here. He paused in the doorway. The words reached him like a hand across water. He looked back, steady, certain. Then I will keep showing up, he said, until fear has nowhere left to live. The hall greeted him with silence. He closed his bag and walked slowly toward the stairs, already mapping tests, timelines, contingencies. Yet beneath the clinical plan, a deeper vow thrummed, to treat not only the illness, but the loneliness that had become part of it. Back in the bedroom, Clara slipped under the covers beside her mother, careful not to jostle the IV line. She opened the journal again and wrote, "Doctor said I'm the guardian of details. I will not miss a single thing." Cecilia kissed her daughter's hair. "He sees you," she whispered. Clara whispered back, "He sees you more." The night settled, gentle and honest. For the first time in months, sleep came to both mother and child without dread coiled beneath it. Downstairs, a faint buzz echoed from a phone abandoned on the foyer table. Messages lighting the screen, promises made to someone outside these walls. In the room above, a different promise took root, steady, quiet, steadfast. In a house filled with wealth, the rarest gift was care. True love showed itself not in grand gestures, but in the daily choice to tend to the fragile and call it precious. The house grew quieter after sunset. Staff whispered their goodnights and retreated to the servants' quarters. Adrian had left for the city hours earlier, claiming business that could not wait. Clara had fallen asleep with her journal still open across her lap, ink smudged where her hand had drifted mid-sentence. Elias lingered in the study. He had planned only to review Cecilia's test notes, but his pen lay untouched. The hush of the mansion pressed around him, broken only by the soft tick of the clock above the mantel. Something about the silence made the air heavier, more personal. He carried the file upstairs, intending to leave it on the nightstand. But when he opened the door, he found Cecilia awake, sitting against the pillows. A single lamp glowed beside her, washing the room in golden light. "You should be resting," Elias said. Her lips curved faintly. "I have been. But sometimes the quiet is louder than the day." He placed the file aside. "Do you want me to leave you to it?" She shook her head. "Stay a little. It feels easier to breathe when someone is near." He pulled a chair closer, careful not to invade. The lamp cast a soft halo between them. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, Cecilia broke the silence. "Do you ever wonder if people notice the wrong things about you?" Elias tilted his head. "Wrong things? They see elegance and assume strength. They see a smile and think it means joy. But they don't see the weight it takes to keep both in place." He studied her, his eyes steady. "I see tired eyes holding back. I see hands that tremble but still reach for your daughter. I see someone who loves so fiercely she forgets to love herself." The honesty startled her. No one had dared speak to her that way in years. "And what about you, doctor? What do people see when they look at you?" He leaned back slightly. "They see calm, reliability, a professional mask, but they don't see the long nights or the silence of an empty house waiting for me." Her gaze softened. "That sounds lonelier than mine." "Perhaps," he admitted, "but it allows me to recognize it in others." Their eyes met, too long, too deep. Cecilia was the first to look away, pressing her scarf tighter around her shoulders. Elias noticed her shiver. Without thinking, he rose and adjusted the blanket across her lap. His hand brushed against hers, an accidental touch, yet it lingered half a second longer than it should have. Cecilia inhaled sharply, then released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "You should not," she began, her voice trembling. "I know," he said gently. He withdrew, settling back into the chair, but his gaze never left her. "I've spent years in a house full of people, yet I've never felt more alone," she confessed. "But when you sit here, it feels different, as if silence finally has meaning." His throat tightened. He wanted to reach for her again, but restraint pulled at him. Instead, he said, "Sometimes presence says what words cannot." Cecilia turned toward him, her eyes glistening. The lamp caught the sheen of tears she tried to hide. Minutes passed in stillness, yet nothing felt empty. The warmth between them filled every space the mansion failed to provide. Clara stirred lightly at the foot of the bed, and Cecilia reached for her daughter's blanket, tucking it tighter. Elias watched the motion, so tender, so instinctive, and something in his chest shifted. "You're more than fragile," he said quietly. "You're stronger than anyone gives you credit for." She held his gaze this time. "And you're more than a doctor." Those words hung between them like a vow neither dared complete. Cecilia's voice dropped to a whisper. "If you keep showing up like this, I don't know if I can keep my heart from noticing." Elias leaned forward, his voice equally hushed. And if I told you my heart has already noticed? Her breath caught. Their eyes locked, the space between them alive with everything unsaid. But then Clara sighed in her sleep, rolling closer to her mother. The spell broke, leaving them with only the echo of what had almost been spoken. Elias stood, steadying himself. You need rest. I'll be here tomorrow. She nodded, though her eyes followed him all the way to the door. Just before he left, she whispered so softly he nearly missed it. Good night, Elias. He paused, hand on the door frame, then answered, Good night, Cecilia. When the door clicked shut, she pressed her hand against her chest, feeling the rapid thrum beneath. She had lived years with her heart asleep. Tonight, it had stirred awake, fragile but undeniable. In the silence of the hallway, Elias leaned against the wall, closing his eyes. He had crossed a line he swore he wouldn't, yet he knew he would cross it again. The city glowed beneath the high windows of the penthouse suite, its restless hum muffled by thick glass. Adrian Marentis stood with a drink in hand, staring at the skyline as if the endless towers would answer questions he dared not ask aloud. His jacket hung carelessly over the chair, his tie loosened, the posture of a man who wanted to forget the weight of home. Behind him, Isolde Renard's laughter rang low and deliberate, the kind of sound designed to soothe a bruised ego. She moved across the room in a silk dress that clung to her like a second skin, each step measured, each glance calculated. She set her glass down beside his, brushing her hand against his sleeve. You're quiet tonight, she said, tilting her head. Still thinking about her? Adrian exhaled sharply. She collapsed in public. Everyone saw. The board won't stop whispering. Investors ask questions. I can't afford scandal. Isolde leaned closer, her perfume clinging to the air between them. Scandal or sympathy? People will only see a delicate woman who can't keep up with the life you built. You've carried her for years. No one could fault you for needing more. Her words slithered into his ear, tempting and cruel. Adrian's jaw tightened. He took a slow sip of his drink, as though he could wash down the discomfort building inside him. She's my wife. On paper, Isolde replied, her tone smooth as glass. But paper tears. You deserve a partner who matches your strength, not one fading in and out of fainting spells. He turned to her, eyes narrowing. You don't know her. Her smile was practiced, unwavering. I don't have to. I know you. And I know the look in your eyes when you walk into these rooms. You crave fire, Adrian, not ashes. She touched his chest, tracing a line down the fabric of his shirt. He didn't move, though every muscle tensed. Somewhere deep inside, guilt stirred. But it was easier to drown in the thrill of being wanted than to sit in silence at home, watching his wife's strength flicker like a dying flame. Isolde leaned closer, whispering, Cecilia is too weak for you. She always has been, and you know it. Adrian closed his eyes. For a moment, he imagined Cecilia's face, pale but serene, her eyes clinging to him in trust that he no longer felt he deserved. The image cut through him like glass. But then Isolde's lips brushed his ear, pulling him back into temptation. His chest rose unevenly. He told himself it was easier this way, that pleasure was simpler than patience, that passion mattered more than care. Yet even as he thought it, a knot tightened in his stomach. He knew what he was trading, and part of him feared the cost. He set his glass down harder than he meant to, amber liquid sloshing against crystal. Stop, he muttered, though the word lacked conviction. Isolde stepped back just enough to study him. You say stop, but you stay. You say loyalty, but you don't go home. Tell me, Adrian, what do you really want? He didn't answer. The silence betrayed him. Outside the windows, the city lights flickered endlessly, but for Adrian Marentis, nothing shone bright enough to illuminate the hollow ache inside. Cecilia lay in her bed that same hour, whispering reassurances to Clara, her hands weak, but her voice strong enough to promise she would still be there come morning. Love held her together. Devotion kept her fighting. And in the penthouse, Adrian chose distraction over devotion, lust over loyalty. If you were in Adrian's shoes, facing a wife who needed care, and another woman whispering in your ear, what choice would you make? Would you stand by the one who trusts you with her life, or chase the thrill of temptation? Drop your answer in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Love is not proven in boardrooms or penthouses, nor in whispered promises of passion. Love is proven by how we nurture the fragile, by choosing care over convenience, devotion over desire. The dining hall glowed with soft light, crystal glasses lined neatly on the table, silver utensils catching the flicker of candles. For once, Adrian was home. Clara had begged for a family dinner, hoping her parents might sit side by side, if only for an hour. Cecilia had dressed carefully, choosing a simple gown in deep blue. Her face pale but lit by a smile meant to reassure her daughter. Clara spoke eagerly about school, her voice filling the air with warmth that the adults could not provide. Adrian listened half-heartedly, nodding, his gaze wandering toward his phone. Cecilia cut small pieces of her food, trying to eat though each bite seemed heavier than the last. Halfway through Clara's story about a class project, Cecilia's fork slipped from her fingers. She froze, her hand clutching the edge of the table. Her eyes fluttered, her lips parted as if to call for help, but no sound came. Then with a sudden jolt, her body leaned sideways. "Mama!" Clara screamed, rushing from her chair to catch her before she hit the ground. Plates shattered, glasses toppled, but the sound was drowned by Clara's cries. Adrian stood slowly, stunned, his movements sluggish, as though disbelief weighed him down. She'll be fine," he muttered, though his voice shook. Clara knelt beside her mother, tears streaking her face. "No, she's not fine. Call him. Call Dr. Moreau now." Adrian fumbled for his phone, his hands unsteady. Clara didn't wait. She bolted from the room, her small feet pounding against marble floors as she raced for the telephone in the hall. With trembling fingers, she dialed the number scribbled on the card Elias had left by the bed. The line connected. "Dr. Moreau," came the calm voice. "It's Mama. She collapsed again." Clara sobbed. "Please come. Please hurry." "I'm on my way," Elias said. There was no hesitation, no wasted word. Outside, the night had turned harsh. Winds pressed against the windows, branches scratched across the gates. Elias drove with both hands gripping the wheel, his eyes sharp, every second a battle against distance. His heart hammered, not only with professional urgency but with something far more personal, the image of Cecilia's fragile frame slipping away. Inside the mansion, Clara sat at her mother's side, clutching her limp hand. Adrian paced near the window, running a hand through his hair, muttering about ambulances and publicity. "We should wait. Someone else will come," he said. "No," Clara shouted through her tears. "He promised he'd come. He's the only one who cares." Cecilia stirred faintly, her lips moving without sound. Clara bent low, pressing her ear to her mother's mouth. She caught fragments. "Don't leave me." Her heart clenched. "I won't, Mama. I won't." Moments later, the heavy knock of urgency rattled the door. Clara dashed to open it. Elias entered, coat damp, bag in hand, eyes immediately searching the room until they found Cecilia. He dropped to his knees beside her, movement swift but precise. "Talk to me, Cecilia. Stay with me," he urged, sliding his stethoscope into place. Her pulse faltered beneath his touch, shallow but present. "Adrian, hold the light steady," Elias ordered. Adrian stiffened. "What, me?" "Yes, you," Elias snapped, for the first time letting sharpness cut through his calm. "If you want her alive, you will help." Shaken, Adrian obeyed, his hands trembling as he held the lamp over the doctor's work. Elias checked vitals, examined her pupils, gave quick instructions to Clara. "Wet cloth, forehead, now." Clara darted off, returning in seconds. She pressed the cloth against her mother's skin, whispering, "Don't go, Mama. Stay with me." Elias injected a stabilizing dose, his eyes never leaving her face. Slowly, color began to return. Cecilia's eyelids fluttered open, weak but aware. "Doctor," she breathed. "I'm here," Elias said firmly. His hand remained on hers, anchoring her back to the world. Her eyes locked with his, filled with gratitude and something deeper, unspoken but undeniable. Minutes passed like hours until Cecilia's breathing steadied. Elias gave instructions to the staff, fresh linens, broth, no heavy food. He arranged a chair beside her bed and sat, refusing to leave her side until he was sure she was safe. Clara curled against her mother, tears still clinging to her lashes but relief softening her expression. "I told you he'd come," she whispered. Cecilia turned her head toward Elias, her lips trembling with words too faint to carry. He leaned close, and she whispered, "You came through the night. For me." "Yes," he said, voice steady. "For you." Adrian lingered at the doorway, silent, his eyes darting between them. He saw the way his wife's fingers clung to Elias's, how his daughter leaned against the doctor as though he were the pillar she trusted most. And though he said nothing, the truth stood naked in front of him. In his absence, another man had taken his place in the hearts of the two people he was meant to protect. The storm raged on outside, but within those walls, something deeper had shifted. For Cecilia, safety had a face and a name. For Clara, faith had been rewarded. And for Elias, what began as duty was becoming something more, something he could no longer deny. The storm had passed midnight, but the air still held its weight. The house was hushed. Clara had fallen into restless sleep beside her mother, worn out from tears. The staff had withdrawn to their quarters, leaving the rooms steeped in silence. Only one light remained burning, the lamp by Cecilia's bed, casting a gentle glow across her pale face. Elias sat in the chair at her side, posture weary but unwavering. He had not moved for hours, watching every rise and fall of her chest, his hand resting lightly on her wrist, as if by touch alone he could keep her tethered to the world. When Cecilia stirred at last, her eyes fluttering open, they found him instantly. There was no surprise in her gaze, only recognition, as though she had expected him to be there. "You should rest," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I will," he replied softly, "when I'm sure you'll be safe through the night." Her lips curved faintly, a smile shadowed by exhaustion but warmed by gratitude. "You've already given me more safety than I've known in years." He shifted, leaning closer. Safety should not be a rare gift. It should be your everyday. She studied him for a long moment, her eyes tracing the lines of his face, the quiet steadiness that had carried her through collapse after collapse. She reached out, hesitant at first, then let her hand settle over his. "You came when I called," she murmured. "You came even before I asked." Elias's throat tightened. "I would come every time, day or night. Nothing would keep me from you." Her fingers lingered on his, fragile but certain. For the first time, she allowed herself to rest her head against his shoulder. He froze only for a second, then lowered his cheek gently against her hair. The warmth of her presence disarmed him, stripped away the layers of distance he had kept as a physician. Minutes stretched, filled only with the sound of her breath and the faint tick of the clock. Neither spoke, but the silence brimmed with words unsaid. When she lifted her head again, their faces were closer than either had expected. Her eyes glistened, not with illness but with unspoken longing. "Elias," she whispered, uncertain whether she was asking a question or confessing a truth. He held her gaze, steady, searching. "Yes." Her lips parted, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, her hand rose, trembling, brushing against his jaw as though testing whether he was real. His breath stilled under her touch. "Cecilia," he said, her name a vow. The distance between them collapsed in a heartbeat. His lips found hers, slow, tender, reverent. It was not the hunger of passion, but the relief of two souls who had been waiting too long to be held. She leaned into him with a quiet sob, a sound of release more than desire, and he wrapped her gently in his arms, careful not to press, not to claim, only to cradle. For Cecilia, it was the first time in years she felt cherished. For Elias, it was the first time his heart beat not for duty but for love. They parted only for breath, their foreheads resting together. "I shouldn't," she began, her voice breaking. "You should," he answered softly, "because this is not wrong. It's the truth your heart has been carrying." Her tears slipped free. "All I've wanted is to feel alive again, to feel seen." "You are alive," he said firmly. "You are seen, and I will not let you forget it." He kissed her again, deeper but still tender, sealing his promise. The night became theirs, no words, no vows spoken aloud, only the quiet communion of touch, the warmth of closeness, the shared relief of no longer being alone. Their hands entwined, their breaths mingled, and for those hours, the weight of sickness and betrayal dissolved. When dawn began to pale the curtains, Cecilia stirred against him. She lay curled in the shelter of his arms, her hair spilling across his chest. Her eyes fluttered open, softened by a peace she had not felt in years. "I thought I was dying," she whispered, voice barely audible. "You were fighting alone," Elias replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "But you don't have to anymore." She pressed her palm to his chest, feeling the steady beat beneath. "I never wanted wealth, Elias. I wanted this. I wanted someone who would stay." He kissed her forehead gently. Then stay, I will. Clara's soft breathing stirred from the other side of the bed. The reminder of her daughter's presence brought a delicate smile to Cecilia's lips. She must never be hurt by this. She won't be, Elias said. She will only see her mother strong again. That's all that matters. Cecilia nestled closer, closing her eyes. For the first time, I believe it. And in that quiet moment, as the world beyond their door carried on, two souls found in each other the peace they had been denied. The suite looked perfect. Fresh flowers, neat lines, a bed turned down as if romance could be arranged like room service. Adrian loosened his cufflinks with the distracted air of a man trying to quiet a noise inside his head. Isolde poured 2 drinks, crossing the floor with the grace of a performer who knows every step. You're tense, she said, handing him a glass. You need relief, not guilt. He took a swallow he didn't taste. I need quiet. You came to the right place, she murmured, sliding a hand along his shoulder. No questions, no weakness, just you and me. The word weakness landed between them like a dropped coin. He glanced at the floor instead of her face. She stepped closer and guided his chin up with a polished fingertip. Don't think, she whispered. Thinking ruins the moment. He tried to comply. He let his jacket fall, watched it settle over the chair as if that would settle him too. Isolde traced his collarbone with practiced ease, her touch designed for effect. He responded because responding required less effort than honesty. They kissed, the kind that looks right in a mirror and leaves nothing behind. Her mouth moved with certainty. His followed with habit. When she pressed against him, he felt heat but not warmth, nearness but not closeness. The difference had a weight he couldn't ignore. She broke away, smiling like a victor. See? You're better already. Am I? He asked, though he meant it to sound playful. She pretended not to hear the flatness. You need someone who matches your pace, someone who won't slow you down with fragility. The word stung. He saw Cecilia's pale face rise in his mind. His wife, so careful with their daughter's heart, so careful with his pride, even now. He pushed the image away and reached for Isolde, not out of desire but out of defiance. She rewarded him with a satisfied sigh that felt like applause. They moved to the bed. She guided him, as if following choreography. Every gesture was flawless, every angle chosen, every breath placed. It should have felt intoxicating. Instead, he felt like a man standing outside his own life, watching a scene that might convince others but could not convince him. Isolde dragged her nails lightly across his chest. You work too hard. You carry too much. With me, you have no burdens. He thought of Clara's small hands holding Cecilia's, of a child who had begged him to call the doctor while he hesitated. He thought of the way she looked at him tonight at dinner, pleading without saying a word. The memory unsettled him so deeply that he turned back to Isolde with more urgency than before, anything to push it down. Focus, she whispered, guiding his mouth to her neck. Forget the rest. So he did what she asked. He kept his eyes closed and chased a feeling that never arrived. When at last he opened them, the ceiling stared back without mercy. Isolde rolled onto her side, head propped in her palm, wearing a smile. He recognized from magazine covers, smooth, composed, victorious. You see, she said, this is what you deserve. Power without complication. He tried to smile, but the effort showed. You think that's what I want? It's obvious, she said lightly. You keep coming back. He looked for a reply and found none. The truth was uncomfortable. He came back because it was easy. Because ease mimicked happiness well enough to trick him for an hour. She reached for his hand, posed their fingers together like a photograph of intimacy. You don't owe anyone a life of caretaking, she murmured. You owe yourself fulfillment. He flinched at the word. He had used it in boardrooms, he had sold it in speeches, but here it sounded thin. He pictured Cecilia again, her eyelids fluttering open to the doctor's voice. The way her hand clung to that steady presence as if it were life itself. He pictured Clara's journal on the nightstand, the tiny script declaring her the guardian of details. The ache in his chest sharpened. Isolde watched him drift and tightened her hold. Stay with me. I'm here, he said, though he knew he wasn't. Silence gathered. She studied his face like a strategist reading a map. You're thinking of her, she said finally, not as a question. He didn't deny it. She will always be delicate, Isolde continued, tone cool. You can't live chained to someone who needs constant tending. He sat up, the sheet falling to his waist. She is my wife. Which part of that marriage still breathes? Isolde asked softly. The vows, or just the name? He looked toward the window. The city glowed, indifferent. He had chased importance for so long that he'd forgotten the shape of tenderness. Now, in the echo after performance, the absence roared. Isolde reached for him again, but he stood, searching for his shirt. I should go. She laughed lightly, not surprised. You'll call again. Maybe, he said, though the word rang hollow. He dressed in silence. She watched, unruffled, like someone certain of the next move in a game that had gone on too long. At the door, he paused, hand on the handle. What if she gets worse? He asked, voice thin. Doctors handle that, Isolde replied. You handle your life. He nodded once and left. In the hallway, he exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. His chest felt empty, not from loss, but from the lack of anything real to fill it. He checked his phone. No messages from home. He told himself that meant everything was fine. He told himself many things as he rode the elevator down, none of them convincing. Outside, a car waited. He climbed in and stared straight ahead, seeing only the image of his daughter waking at dawn to check her mother's breath, and of a man who wasn't him sitting beside the bed. Passion had been offered to him on silver. It left no warmth. Smash the like button if you believe true love is about care, not status. Passion without love is hollow. Elias kept a small notebook by Cecilia's bedside, its pages filling with scribbled observations that gave shape to the unease he could no longer dismiss. Her pulse dipped when it shouldn't. The faint discoloration at her fingertips didn't match any simple explanation. Even the faint bruising at the bend of her arm, Adrian had brushed it off as clumsiness, told him another story. Every time he leaned over her, stethoscope cold against her chest, he felt the weight of a puzzle that refused to be solved by the obvious. Exhaustion didn't leave a woman so pale. Stress didn't explain the odd trace of bitterness at the edge of her breath. Something was wrong, and someone wanted it hidden. Cecilia tried to smile when he asked gentle questions, but the effort pulled at her like an invisible thread tearing. I'm fine, she would say softly, but her eyes betrayed her, flicking toward the door as though afraid of being overheard. Clara stayed close, notebook in hand. She had begun recording every cough, every faint, every tremor. Her father dismissed it as a child's dramatics, but Elias studied the careful details she gathered like a fellow professional. One night, she crept to him with the small ledger pressed against her chest. Dr. Moreau, she whispered, Mama's getting worse. Look, the notes were meticulous, times of collapse, how long until consciousness returned, whether her lips looked blue. Elias turned each page with growing gravity. This was not a child's imagination. This was the record of a girl desperate to be heard. When Adrian entered the room later, Elias kept his expression calm. Her symptoms don't match fatigue, he said plainly. Adrian waved a dismissive hand. She overexerts herself. She refuses to rest. That's all this is. No, Elias replied. Firmer now. I've seen rest cure exhaustion. I've seen medicine settle nerves. This evades all of that. Something is being overlooked. Adrian's jaw tightened. You're making it sound worse than it is. Do you want to frighten my wife or my child? Cecilia's eyes flinched at the words, though she said nothing. That night, Elias returned to his small apartment and pulled out medical journals. He studied toxicology charts until his eyes ached, tracing every symptom, against lists of poisons he had only read about during his training. His mind circled the same dreadful possibility. Cecilia's illness wasn't natural. The next morning, he returned to the mansion early. Clara was already awake, kneeling by the bed. She didn't sleep much, she whispered. Elias checked her pulse, frowning. Slower again. The pattern was clear, sharp decline after meals, partial recovery by dawn. His suspicion sharpened into something more damning. He excused himself and went downstairs. The housekeeper greeted him politely, but he watched the staff with new eyes now. Who brought the food, who poured the drinks, who lingered too long by the trays. In the kitchen, he examined the teapot Cecilia used each evening. The faintest residue clung to the porcelain rim, invisible except to someone searching for it. He dipped a cloth, sniffed, and caught a bitter trace that did not belong in chamomile. His stomach dropped. Still, suspicion without proof was fragile. He would need to test it. Quietly, he asked a trusted colleague in the city lab to run analysis on a discrete sample. He lied about where it came from. Curiosity, he said. an academic exercise. But in his chest burned the truth: someone was poisoning Cecilia. When he returned upstairs, Clara clutched his sleeve. "You believe me now, don't you?" He crouched to her level, his voice steady. "Yes, Clara, and I promise I will protect her." That evening he stayed by Cecilia's side through dinner. Adrian excused himself halfway through, distracted as ever. Isolde's perfume lingered faintly on his suit, Cecilia noticed, though she lowered her gaze and said nothing. Elias watched closely as the maid poured tea. He noted the faint tremor of her hand, the way her eyes avoided his. He noted, too, how Cecilia winced after the first sip, her throat tightening as though swallowing fire masked in warmth. Later that night, she clutched his wrist, her strength waning. "Don't let Clara see me fade," she whispered. He pressed her hand. "I won't. I'll find the truth." The promise felt heavier than any oath he had ever spoken. 2 days later, the lab results arrived. The letter was brief but enough to confirm the dread that had haunted his nights. Minute traces of a toxin, cumulative in effect, disguised easily in warm drinks. Not enough to kill quickly, but enough to hollow her out piece by piece. Elias closed his eyes, anger knotting in his chest. Someone in that house wanted her diminished. Someone she trusted. That night, he lingered by her bedside until Clara drifted asleep beside her mother. Cecilia opened her eyes and whispered, "You found something, haven't you?" He hesitated. To tell her was to hand her fear, but to hide it was to leave her defenseless. "Yes," he said softly, "and it means you've been right to feel afraid." Her breath shook, but she held his gaze with more courage than he expected. "Don't let him know yet," she whispered. "Not until you're sure who it is." The weight of her plea pressed against him. He nodded. Downstairs, Adrian laughed too loudly into the phone, his voice drifting up the staircase. Isolde's name slipped like silk into the air. Elias clenched his fists. Wealth could buy silence, distractions, indulgence, but it could not buy back a life once drained by betrayal. And now he knew, Cecilia wasn't merely ill. She was being erased, one sip at a time. Morning arrived softly, the kind of light that lifts a room without waking it too quickly. Cecilia dozed in and out, her breathing thin but steady. Elias sat nearby with a small notebook open, rereading the lab result that had confirmed what he feared. He kept his face calm for Clara's sake, though the truth pressed hard against his ribs. Clara hovered at the foot of the bed, journal tucked under her arm. She looked older than 12 in the way worry pinched her mouth. When Cecilia drifted back to sleep, Clara glanced at Elias, as if asking permission to speak without waking her mother. He nodded and followed the child into the hallway. They sat on the bench near the tall window. Clara opened her journal to a page marked with a ribbon. "I think I did something wrong," she whispered. "Or maybe I just waited too long to say it." "You haven't done anything wrong," Elias said. "Tell me what you're holding." Her finger traced a small note written 2 pages back, in tiny neat letters. "Thursday. Tea tasted different." Mama grimaced, said it was fine. Isolde visited earlier. Clara swallowed. "I saw Isolde by Mama's medicine tray." The words landed with a clarity that made Elias feel both relief and dread. He kept his tone even. "When did you see her there?" "A week ago," Clara said. "I had a rehearsal after school, but it was canceled. I came home early. I went upstairs to show Mama a new part in my piece. When I got to the doorway, Isolde was already in the room. She said she was checking on Mama, bringing flowers from the driver. She smiled at me, but her hand was near the pill case. She closed it quick when she saw me. Did you see what she touched?" Clara nodded. The white capsules in the top left section. They were lined up a certain way. Mama keeps everything straight. After Isolde left, the line looked different. Like, one didn't match the others, and the tea, it smelled sweet, but there was something sharp under it. Mama took a sip and made a face. She said it was nothing. Elias steadied his breath. "You noticed the order changed. Anything else?" Clara glanced down, ashamed. "I told myself not to make a fuss. Papa says I invent problems." But that night Mama was dizzy again. "I wrote it here," she said, tapping the page. "I should have told you sooner." "You're telling me now," Elias said, his voice warm. "That's brave. Can you show me the tray?" They returned to the bedroom. Cecilia slept, a faint furrow in her brow, one hand curled near her cheek like a child seeking comfort. Clara moved quietly to the vanity. The pill case sat where it always did, Silver lid, mother of pearl inlay, each day labeled in delicate script. The sections for the week were filled with careful order. Too careful, Elias realized, for someone struggling with strength. A staff member must be setting it. Or someone else. He drew on gloves from his bag. I'm going to look closely. We won't disturb anything. He opened the Monday compartment and examined a capsule beneath the light. Powder showed at the seam, barely visible. He compared it to another from a bottle in the drawer. The color matched, yet the texture inside seemed different, finer, almost sandy. He placed both into small labeled envelopes. Clara watched him, eyes round. Will Mama be okay? She will, he said, meaning it as a vow. You've given me something we can act on. Clara's shoulders dropped with relief. I didn't want to hurt Papa by saying it might be Isolde, but I don't know who else would touch Mama's things. He sat on the bench again, so they could speak eye to eye. It's not your job to protect anyone's pride, he told her gently. Your job is to protect your mother's life. You're doing that. Clara's throat wobbled. I love him because he's my father, but I don't know how to love him when he chooses her over us. Elias did not speak for a moment. There were wounds in that sentence too deep for quick answers. Love isn't blind, he said at last. It sees clearly and still cares. You can tell the truth and still love him. That is the bravest kind of love. She nodded, wiping at her eyes. What do we do next? We'll confirm what's in those capsules, he said. Quietly. I want to be certain before we confront anyone. In the meantime, no tea prepared outside this room, no drinks left unattended. You or I will handle everything your mother eats or drinks. Clara straightened, purposeful. I can help with that. He smiled. I know. They returned to Cecilia's side. She stirred and opened her eyes, taking in their faces with fragile relief. Is everything all right? Clara smoothed the blanket. We're just organizing your medicines, Mama. Doctor says we'll keep things simple for a few days. Cecilia studied their joint effort as if it were a balm stronger than any tonic. I trust your hands, she said, voice thread-thin but certain. Both of you. When she drifted back to sleep, Elias stepped into the corridor and called his colleague at the lab, choosing his words carefully. I need analysis on 2 capsules, quiet as a whisper. He gave no names, only codes. Trust had to be earned. He would risk nothing that could tip off the wrong person. Downstairs, the household moved through its afternoon routines. The clatter of dishes echoed from the kitchen. Voices rose and fell as chores were assigned. Elias entered with a polite smile that masked a mind cataloging everything. Who brewed what? Who delivered trays? Who answered the phone? He thanked the cook for the simple soup that had helped Cecilia keep something down at noon, complimented the aroma, asked a harmless question about where the tea was stored. The tins lined the shelf in neat rows. Chamomile, mint, lemon, ginger, and a 5th tin with no label, tucked farther back. He lifted the lid. The scent was floral with an underlying bite, unfamiliar. He took a small pinch into another envelope for testing. The maid who usually carried the tea stepped in. Her eyes widened at the sight of the open tin. Sir, that one is, well, Mr. Morentis prefers it for guests. It's expensive. We don't use it often. For guests, Elias repeated mildly. Has Mrs. Morentis been served from it? I only serve what I'm told, she said, confused and wary. Sometimes Miss Renard brings her own blends for Mr. Morentis and his visitors. Ms. Renard? The name rested on the surface like oil on water, impossible to mix with anything clean. Thank you, he said, closing the tin. Please send up hot water only from now on. I'll handle the rest. He carried the envelopes to his car a few minutes later, heartbeat measured, steps casual. At the curb, he looked up to the windows of Cecilia's room. A small figure stood there, Clara, watching to be sure he did not leave without a plan. Elias touched 2 fingers to the brim of his coat. A silent promise. By late afternoon, Clara had crafted a new routine with military precision. She sterilized a small glass kettle in the room, measured plain hot water, and steeped only from sealed bags, she opened herself with Elias watching. She replaced the pill case with a fresh one labeled by Elias, keeping the old case sealed in a box. She wrote every detail in her journal, each line a thread that held her mother steady. Adrian returned near sunset, the scent of cologne preceding him down the hall. He paused at the doorway, taking in the kettle, the new pill case, the doctor's unshakable presence. Is this necessary? he asked, already weary of the question he kept asking. It is, Elias answered without apology. Adrian bristled, then forced a smile at his daughter. How is your mother, Clara? She's resting, she said, not unkind, but with a guard in her eyes he'd never seen before. He shifted, uncomfortable. Good. Keep doing whatever the doctor says. He made as if to approach the tray, perhaps intending to assert some control. Clara blocked him without thinking, placing her small body between his hand and the case. Please don't touch those, she said. Doctor has a system. A flicker of surprise crossed Adrian's features. He withdrew his hand. Of course. When he left, the room exhaled. Cecilia's eyes opened. She had heard more than she let on. You're braver than I was at your age, she whispered to Clara. I learned from you, Clara replied, kissing her mother's temple. Night draped itself over the house. Elias remained, quietly checking Cecilia's pulse at intervals, scribbling. Updates, trading soft nods with Clara that needed no words. The first tin of hot water cooled. Clara prepared another. Each simple act felt like a thread woven through fear, drawing mother and child back toward safety. Near midnight, Elias's phone vibrated with a message from the lab. Trace amounts match your prior sample. He closed his eyes briefly. The 2 capsules taken from the case differed from the bottle in the drawer. The unmarked tin likely held the same harmful agent disguised in fragrance and sugar. He returned to the bedside. Cecilia watched him, reading the answer in his face before he spoke. Her fingers reached for his, seeking steadiness. It's not your body failing you, he said softly. It's something being placed into it. A tear slid across her cheek. Who would do this? We'll confirm the how and the who, he said. Clara gave us the missing piece. Clara stood straighter, both relieved and burdened by what her memory had unlocked. I'll testify if I have to, she said, chin lifted. You won't be alone, Elias promised. He looked down at their hands, Cecilia's delicate grip, Clara's fierce hold, his own steady palm bridging them, and felt the purpose that had brought him through their door that first night turn into iron certainty. He would shield them, not only from sickness, but from the quiet cruelty that had fed it. The truth was no longer a guess. It had a time, a place, a witness, and soon it would have a face. The night was thick with silence, a silence that seemed to lean on the walls of the Morentis estate and demand breath. Adrian had returned late, still scented with liquor and the faint musk of cologne, his tie loosened, his shoes tapping with a careless rhythm. He expected another evening of shallow reassurances, his wife asleep, his daughter tucked away, the physician quietly fading into the background. But Elias was waiting. He stood near the library hearth, the envelope of lab results in his hand, the firelight throwing sharp angles across his face. The room smelled of leather and ash, the kind of place where power was often spoken in whispers, never challenged aloud. Yet tonight, challenge had arrived. Adrian noticed at once that Elias did not rise to greet him, nor did he speak with the polite softness he usually carried. There was something unshakable in the way the doctor held himself, shoulders squared, gaze firm, voice clipped when he finally broke the silence. We need to speak, Elias said. Adrian gave a half smile, pouring himself a drink from the decanter on the side table. At this hour? Surely it can wait until morning. No, Elias replied. It cannot. The weight in the words drew Adrian's eyes up. He paused with the glass midway to his lips. Then speak. Elias laid the envelope on the desk between them, sliding it forward as though setting down a verdict. These are the results from the capsules I took from Cecilia's tray. They are not what they appear to be. They've been tampered with. Adrian's jaw tightened. Tampered? Poisoned, Elias said plainly. The glass in Adrian's hand trembled. For a man who thrived on composure, the falter was striking. He set the drink down slowly, as if any sudden motion might shatter the moment. You're certain? Elias's gaze did not waver. I sent them to a trusted lab, under strict codes. The analysis confirms it. Your wife is not failing from natural weakness. She is being weakened. Adrian's face blanched, a man stripped of the armor of denial. For the first time in years, perhaps, words did not leap to his defense. His mouth opened, then closed. He sank into the leather chair behind him, fingers gripping the armrests as if the ground itself had tilted beneath him. Who? He whispered. Your daughter gave me the final clue, Elias said. She saw someone at the tray, someone who should never have been near it. Adrian's eyes flicked up, sharp and wide. Clara? She saw, Isolde, Elias said, his voice measured, cutting through the room like a blade. By Cecilia's medicine. The name landed like a blow. Adrian flinched, his shoulders collapsing inward. For all his pride, all his wealth, his power had never looked so hollow. He dragged a hand across his mouth, as if to erase the taste of the truth. No, he muttered. No, she wouldn't. She would, Elias cut in. She has motive, access, and opportunity, and she has you distracted, so blinded by her presence that you missed what was happening in your own house. Adrian's breath grew ragged. The man who had once moved through life with effortless authority now looked like a boy cornered, stripped of answers. His hand reached for the glass, then recoiled, as if even the amber liquid might betray him now. He stared at Elias, voice breaking. And Clara, she told you this? Elias nodded. She did. She's braver than most adults I've known. She carried this weight until she couldn't anymore, and now the truth is here. The fire crackled, filling the cavern of silence that followed. Adrian pressed both hands to his face, dragging them down slowly until his eyes showed again, red-rimmed, haunted, no longer proud but pleading. I was a fool, he whispered. All these nights, all those excuses. I thought I was escaping loneliness. I thought I deserved warmth, even if borrowed. And all the while, my wife, my Cecilia. His voice broke. He could not finish. Elias stepped forward, his tone steady, but edged with steel. This is no longer about your foolishness. This is about your responsibility. You are her husband. You are Clara's father. And if you do nothing now, you are as guilty as the hand that poisoned her. The words struck true. Adrian closed his eyes, shoulders quaking. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with a shuddering breath, he rose from the chair. The drink remained untouched. What must I do? He asked. You must face her, Elias said. Face Isolde. And when you do, you must choose. Your loyalty to desire, or your duty to love. One destroys, the other heals. You cannot cling to both. Adrian's throat worked as though swallowing stones. He moved to the window, staring out into the night where rain had begun to tap against the glass. His reflection stared back at him, a man he hardly recognized, stripped of the illusions that had once gilded his life. I thought wealth could guard us from suffering, he said bitterly. That comfort would silence any fracture in the walls of our lives. But I see it now. What I built was nothing but glass, and one touch from her has shattered it. Elias let the silence stretch, then answered with quiet conviction. Love is not proven by what we build for the world to see. It is proven by what we nurture in private. Cecilia does not need your palaces or your parties. She needs your protection. She needs your care. Adrian's eyes closed, a tear sliding down his cheek, despite his effort to mask it. The man who had prided himself on strength stood broken, yet in the breaking, perhaps more human than he had ever been. He turned back, voice low but resolute. I will confront her. Not tomorrow. Tonight. Elias gave a firm nod. Then I'll be here when you do. The clock in the hall chimed midnight, each strike reverberating through the air like a judgment. Adrian stood tall, his face pale but set. He walked past Elias toward the door, each step heavy with dread, yet sharpened by resolve. The doctor remained by the fire, his hands folded behind his back, listening to the echo of footsteps fade down the corridor. Somewhere above, Cecilia slept in fragile peace, unaware that the walls around her life were trembling. And somewhere else in the house, Isolde waited, cloaked in beauty, in whispers, in lies. The stage was set for the inevitable. Truth had been unearthed, evidence laid bare, and a man once untouchable had been brought to his knees by the simple, devastating clarity of his daughter's witness. When Adrian disappeared into the shadows of the hall, Elias whispered to the silence, not as a prayer but as a vow, she will not suffer in vain. The confrontation had only begun, but its fire would consume what could no longer remain hidden. If this twist shocked you, hit subscribe so you never miss stories like this. The dawn broke softly over the estate, carrying with it the faint golden light that seemed almost too gentle for the storm of the night before. For the first time in weeks, the house felt as though it held its breath, not in dread, but in fragile hope. Upstairs, Cecilia lay motionless, her frail body trembling beneath crisp white sheets, the poison still clawing at her veins. Elias sat at her bedside, hands steady though exhaustion weighed on him. A vial of antidote gleamed on the table beside him, alongside carefully measured syringes and strips of medical notes scribbled with desperate precision. He had not left her side through the night. Every flicker of her eyelids, every shallow rise of her chest, he tracked as though watching the seconds of a clock winding down. Adrian stood behind him, uncharacteristically silent. The man who had once drowned silence with distractions now seemed carved into stillness. His eyes never left Cecilia, the sight of her frailty pressing into him like a punishment he knew he had earned. "Is she?" Adrian began, his voice a rasp. "She's fighting," Elias cut in firmly, "and I will fight with her. But she cannot do this alone." Adrian's hands clenched into fists at his sides. He had faced boardrooms, rivals, public scrutiny with ease, but here, in this room, he found himself stripped bare. Every choice he had made, every lie he had believed, every night he had spent, in Isolde's arms while Cecilia's breath grew thinner, burned in him like fire. Elias leaned over Cecilia, his voice low yet threaded with warmth. "Stay with us," he whispered. "Your daughter needs you. Adrian needs you, even if he's only now beginning to see it. Stay." Cecilia stirred faintly, her lips parting with the ghost of a breath. Adrian stumbled closer, his composure fracturing. He fell to his knees by her bedside, clutching her delicate hand in both of his, pressing his forehead against it. "Forgive me," he whispered, his voice broken. "Forgive me for every moment I looked away, for every night I wasn't here, for believing I was owed something more when you were always enough. Stay, I beg you." The plea was raw, unguarded, nothing like the man of pride and distance he had once been. Elias drew the antidote into the syringe, his movements precise, clinical, but his expression betrayed his own tension. He injected it into Cecilia's arm, then sat back, watching, waiting, his heart hammering in time with Adrian's ragged breaths. Minutes dragged like hours. At first, nothing. Then, a tremor in her hand, a flutter in her eyelids, a soft groan escaping her throat. Elias leaned forward at once, adjusting her position, pressing a stethoscope to her chest. "Her heartbeat is strengthening," he murmured. Relief laced his tone, but he did not let it bloom too soon. Adrian clutched Cecilia's hand tighter, tears spilling freely now. "Come back to me. Come back to Clara." Slowly, color crept back into her cheeks. Her breathing deepened, no longer the shallow, fragile rasp of the night before. Her eyes fluttered open, glazed with confusion at first, then softening. As they found Adrian bent over her, his face streaked with tears. "Adrian," she whispered, her voice weak but alive. Something shattered in him then. The walls of wealth, the armor of detachment, all of it crumbled as he lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it with reverence. "I'm here. I will never leave you again." Elias exhaled deeply, a weight lifting from his shoulders. He moved quietly, checking her vitals again, his touch tender. For weeks he had been the anchor, carrying the truth in silence, holding Clara, his fragile trust, and shielding Cecilia from the shadows pressing close. Now, at last, he saw the light breaking through. Adrian turned, his eyes locking with Elias's. For once, pride was gone. In its place stood gratitude, raw and unspoken. "You saved her," he said hoarsely. Elias shook his head. "No, she saved herself. She had the will to fight. I only gave her the means." Adrian bowed his head, humbled. Then, with a sudden, firm voice, he declared, "Isolde is finished. She will never set foot in this house again." The decision cracked through the room like thunder. It was not the voice of a man shielding his indulgence, but the voice of a husband reclaiming his duty, a father reclaiming his home. Clara, who had been waiting by the door all along, rushed forward, her small arms wrapping around her mother with trembling relief. "Mama, I knew you'd wake up. I knew," she cried, burying her face in the sheets. Cecilia's weak smile broke into tears of her own. She stroked her daughter's hair, whispering, "My brave little girl." Elias stepped back, allowing the family their moment. He knew healing would not come in a single morning, nor would forgiveness erase scars. But the path had shifted. The house that had echoed with silence, secrets, and neglect now rang with the sound of weeping, of love rediscovered, of life clawing its way back from the edge. Adrian remained by Cecilia's side, holding both her hand and Clara's. The three of them bound in a circle Elias dared to believe could hold. For the first time in months, hope lived again inside the walls of the Millionaire'S estate. The morning after Cecilia's awakening, The house felt different. For so long it had been filled with hushed whispers, footsteps retreating into separate rooms, and the weight of a silence too heavy for its walls. Now, the stillness held something new, a quiet promise, a fragile thread of hope that dared to stretch into the day. Clara had not let go of her mother's side. The child's small hands clung to Cecilia's arm, as if her very touch could anchor her back to life. Each time Cecilia stirred, Clara's eyes lit with relief, her cheeks wet with tears that she tried to wipe away before her mother noticed. "Don't cry, my love," Cecilia whispered, brushing strands of hair from Clara's damp face. Her voice was fragile, yet steady enough to hold conviction. "Your tears should be for joy now, not sorrow. I'm here." Clara pressed her face into the sheets, her words muffled but firm. "I prayed every night you would wake up. I told Papa he was wrong, that you weren't just tired. I knew it. I felt it." Cecilia's gaze softened. The innocence of her daughter's heart had held more truth than the walls of wealth surrounding them. She drew Clara closer, wrapping trembling arms around her, the embrace filling her with strength far beyond the antidote coursing through her veins. Adrian lingered nearby, torn between stepping forward and hanging back. His shame was a shadow that refused to loosen its grip. He had built empires, yet could not command forgiveness with words alone. Every glance at Cecilia reminded him of how blind he had been, and every glance at Clara reminded him of how easily he had failed the ones who mattered most. Elias stood quietly at the foot of the bed, a silent guardian. His hands were folded, his coat draped over a chair, his eyes carrying both weariness and relief. He had fought to keep Cecilia alive, but now he fought something quieter, his own heart, the bond he had built with her in moments when no one else saw. Cecilia turned her gaze toward him. Her lips curved into a smile so faint it seemed stitched from gratitude. "You didn't just heal my body, Elias. You gave Clara her mother back. You gave Adrian a chance to choose differently." Elias shook his head humbly. "I only did what any man should. The credit belongs to your strength, and the love that tethered you here when it might have been easier to let go." Clara looked up then, her young eyes wide and earnest. "No, Dr. Elias, you're family now. You saved Mama when no one else would listen." Her words fell into the room like a declaration carved in stone. Adrian flinched slightly, the truth striking deep, but he did not protest. Instead, he stepped forward, placing a hand on Elias's shoulder with rare sincerity. "I owe you more than words, for my wife, for my daughter, for opening my eyes when I refused to see." For a moment, silence lingered, not heavy, but full. Cecilia reached out, her hand trembling as she rested it on Elias's arm. "Whatever happens next, you will always hold a place in this family. You stood where others faltered. That cannot be forgotten." Elias's throat tightened. He had never sought recognition, never sought to step between husband and wife, yet the bond was undeniable. Not romance, not desire alone, but something purer, respect, trust, the quiet certainty that true care was rarer than any fortune. Clara nestled back against her mother, her tiny fingers intertwined with Cecilia's. She whispered softly, as if afraid to break the moment, "Now we can be happy again, right?" Cecilia kissed her daughter's forehead, eyes shimmering. "Yes, my darling. Happiness takes work, but it begins here, with us holding each other close and never letting go." Adrian lowered himself onto the bed beside them, his hand joining theirs, a gesture of unity that had been missing for too long. The three of them formed a fragile circle, one broken and mended all in the same breath. Elias quietly stepped back, watching as the cracks in the family began to knit themselves closed. He felt no envy, only a profound sense of purpose fulfilled. His role had been to mend what was broken, even if his heart bore its own hidden ache. As the morning light stretched across the room, Clara's laughter bubbled through her tears. Cecilia's frail voice hummed words of comfort, and Adrian's silence spoke of vows yet to be made but deeply felt. The house, once cold and fractured, began to breathe again. The gardens were alive that evening with the low hum of water trickling from the stone fountain. It had stood there for years, a centerpiece often admired yet rarely noticed. Tonight, however, it seemed to witness more than flowers ever had. The air carried a gentle stillness, the kind that follows storms when hearts are finally brave enough to speak without fear. Cecilia sat on the fountain's edge, her pale fingers trailing across the cool water. Her face, once drained by illness and shadowed by uncertainty, now held color again. She looked fragile still, but the fragility was touched with grace, the kind that comes from surviving the edge of loss. Clara skipped a few steps ahead, her laughter carrying across the courtyard as she played with the petals she had gathered. Elias approached quietly, careful not to intrude, yet drawn by something that went beyond duty. His footsteps on the stone echoed faintly until Cecilia turned, her eyes lifting to meet his. For a moment, neither spoke, because words were too small for the current between them. "You look stronger," he finally said, voice low, as though afraid the night itself might shatter the moment. She smiled faintly. "Stronger than I've felt in months, and that's because of you." He shook his head, but she raised her hand gently, silencing his protest before it began. "Don't deny it, Elias. You were the anchor when the world tried to pull me away. You gave Clara her mother back. You gave me a reason to believe someone still cared beyond appearances." Her words landed softly, yet they filled him with a warmth he had tried to suppress. He lowered himself onto the fountain beside her, their shoulders close, their breaths faintly mingling in the cool night. Clara's giggles rang out as she twirled, her arms full of flower petals. She was their guardian in innocence, a reminder that even in sorrow joy could bloom. She called out, "Mama, look at the crown I made," before placing the petals upon her mother's head with triumphant pride. Cecilia laughed, light, genuine, free of the weight she had carried. Elias felt his chest tighten at the sound. For so long he had only known her in whispers of pain, in moments of hidden tears. To hear her laughter now was to glimpse the woman she had once been, and still could be. Her hand, almost unconsciously, brushed against his. The contact was brief, but it lingered. She looked at him then, her eyes carrying both gratitude and something deeper, something neither dared name. "Elias," she whispered, her voice trembling as though her heart had stepped forward before her words could catch up. He turned to her fully, his hand covering hers, steady, warm, unashamed. For an instant, the world stilled. Clara's laughter faded into the background, the water's gentle trickle a soft accompaniment. The weight of everything unsaid pressed against them until finally it broke free. Their lips met, tender and fleeting, an acknowledgement, not a conquest. It was not the kiss of scandal, but of two souls who had carried each other through shadows and found a light neither expected. Cecilia pulled back, her eyes glistening, not with shame but with quiet certainty. Elias searched her gaze, half expecting regret, but what he found instead was peace. "It isn't about defiance," she whispered. "It's about truth. You reminded me I was more than a name in a marriage, more than a shadow in a grand house. You reminded me I was still alive." He cupped her hand gently. "And you reminded me that care, the kind that asks for nothing in return, is the rarest gift of all." Clara returned then, bounding toward them with her petal crown slipping sideways. She stopped suddenly, tilting her head, as if she had caught something she didn't fully understand, but somehow approved. Her small arms reached for both of them. "Stay close to Mama forever, Dr. Elias." The innocence of her plea made Cecilia's eyes brim with tears. She gathered Clara into her lap, Elias resting a protective hand on the child's shoulder. Together, they sat beneath the soft hum of the fountain. 3 lives bound not by scandal, but by survival, trusts, and something purer than the world outside would ever understand. As the night deepened, Cecilia leaned her head against Elias's shoulder, Clara nestled between them. The fountain's water shimmered under the moonlight, a symbol not of wealth or power, but of renewal. Where once love had felt like a duty gilded in gold, here it was something simpler, cleaner, hope that could not be bought, only given. Some stories leave us entertained, others leave us restless, but a few, like this one, stay with us because they hold up a mirror to what truly matters. Cecilia's journey began with fragility, a body failing under pressures no one dared name. But what nearly destroyed her was not illness alone, it was neglect. Wealth had filled her home with chandeliers, polished tables, and endless luxuries, yet none of those things could soothe the ache of being unseen. In a house where love was measured by status, she was left to wither. Adrian had everything that the world celebrates: fortune, power, admiration, but in forgetting loyalty, he almost lost what mattered most. His search for excitement with Isolde was not passion, but hunger that could never be satisfied. Their closeness was hollow because it lacked the one ingredient that makes intimacy sacred: care. Clara, with her child's innocence, became the unexpected truth-teller. She saw what adults missed, and her simple words revealed more wisdom than all the wealth in her father's hands. A daughter's love for her mother, pure, loyal, unquestioning, was the force that drew Elias deeper, the thread that stitched together hope where despair had torn holes. And then there was Elias. He was not wealthy, nor did he have titles or glittering rooms to his name, but what he carried was rarer. He listened. He noticed. He stood when others turned away. His strength was not in grandeur, but in gentleness, and that was what saved Cecilia's life and restored Clara's laughter. The lesson is clear. Love without loyalty destroys families. It tears trust apart, turning homes into cages. But true love, the kind born from care and sacrifice, does more than heal. It preserves. It makes the weak strong, it gives the forgotten a place to stand, and it turns strangers into family. Cecilia's story is not simply about betrayal and survival. It is about the truth that no fortune, no appearance, no fleeting thrill can replace the daily choice to stay loyal, to cherish, and to protect. In the end, that choice was what restored her breath, her joy, and her hope. So I leave you with this: when the storms come, and they always do, what will hold your life together is not wealth, nor charm, nor power. It will be loyalty. It will be love proven in small, faithful acts. That is the treasure worth guarding. If this story touched you, like, share, and subscribe to Mr. Ross Story Trail for more tales with life lessons.